Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really embarking on something profound. We're going to investigate an idea that underpins almost everything in modern life.
We are. And that idea is progress.
Exactly. Progress. We are completely obsessed with getting ahead, faster phones, quicker deliveries, more convenience.
We call that civilization.
We do. We call it progress. But what if we've confused all that frantic activity with genuine forward movement? What if the path we're all on is, actually leading us nowhere?
That is the core question for today. We're taking a deep dive into this incredibly rigorous philosophical framework, drawing heavily from Sanskrit concepts to define what true, net positive human progress actually looks like.
So our sources really provide a map for this.
An undeniable map. It forces us to analyze movement across three, essential levels of human existence. The physical, the intellectual, and most crucially, the spiritual.
Okay, let's unpack this with some real precision then. We have to start with the foundational term you mentioned. It's pragati, right?
Pragati.
What is the philosophical definition of that? Because it sounds a lot more rigorous than just, making things better.
Oh, it's entirely rigorous.
Right.
Fundamentally, progress, or pragati, is defined by the direction of your movement. The source material puts it very succinctly. Prakristagati ityartha pragati.
And what does that translate to?
It means movement, yes, but it's specifically movement towards shuha, which translates as the good or auspiciousness. It's directional. It's movement towards something that is inherently positive.
So wait, if I'm moving, but I'm moving towards something neutral, or even worse, something detrimental, that doesn't count as progress, even if I'm, pouring in a ton of effort and changing my position?
It does not. That negative movement has a name.
What's it called?
If the movement is not towards shuha, it's defined as adhogati.
Adhogati.
Or retardation. The distinction here is absolutely critical.
Okay, give us an analogy.
Think of it this way. You're walking. Both ascending a mountain and descending a mountain are examples of physical movement, right?
Yeah.
You're burning calories either way.
Right.
But only the movement that brings you higher, closer to the peak, closer to the good, only that qualifies as pragati. The downward motion, no matter how fast or how much energy it takes, is adhogati.
That immediately reframes the entire conversation. It means we have to know the ultimate destination. So we're aiming for shubha, the good. What's the final, supreme destination this upward movement is supposed to lead us to?
The essential mission of life, according to this framework, is defined by the quality of that progression. The only movement that truly qualifies as progress is the one that leads not just from shuha,
the good,
but all the way to parama shuha.
that supreme good.
Supreme good. This ultimate destination, this state of supreme blessedness, that is the singular ultimate goal of life. Everything else we do has to be measured against its contribution to reaching that parama shuha.
I really appreciate that clarity. So we have a goal, parama shuha, and we have a mechanism, pragati, which is defined by positive upward movement.
Yeah.
Our roadmap now, then, is to analyze the three realms of human activity to figure out in which of these spheres that net positive, non-retarding movement is actually possible.
Exactly. And let's dive straight into the first sphere. The one that, let's be honest, consumes the vast majority of our collective time and resources.
The physical level.
It's the physical level.
When we talk about progress in the modern world, this is almost always what we mean. It's physical, or what the source material calls jagatic progress.
Yes.
And this covers everything from, infrastructure to comfort technologies. We just assume these are pure, unadulterated gains.
And we can trace that common perception through some really compelling historical examples. Think about the advancement in mobility.
Okay.
We shifted from the slow, the strenuous bullock cart to the efficiency of motor vehicles. That was seen as huge progress.
Of course.
Then from cars to the global reach of airplanes. And now space travel via rockets is sort of the current peak of physical transportation progress.
It's the same story with comfort, isn't it? Think about sleeping. From just resting on the ground to maybe a simple cot or a charpoy, all the way to the super sophisticated, multi-layered spring mattress of today.
Or communication.
Right. From writing on fragile palm leaves or Brujapatra to mass-produced paper, then screens, and now instantaneous digital communication.
So the key question is why? Why did we seek these changes? The sources identify a common thread in all these advancements.
And it's that.
It's simply the attainment of greater ease, convenience, and material enjoyment. Progress is the harbinger of material enjoyment.
So if the plane gets me there faster and the mattress is softer, I'm experiencing more pleasure and less inconvenience. That's a net gain. Simple math, that's what our modern accounting tells us.
And that is exactly where the deeper philosophical analysis kicks in, because we have to immediately introduce the most crucial element in this entire process, the mind.
The mind?
Who is the true enjoyer of all this comfort and convenience?
Well, the natural sort of crude assumption is that my body enjoys physical pleasure.
But the sources are very clear that the body is only the instrument. All pleasure, whether it's physical, intellectual, or even spiritual, is fundamentally experienced and processed through the mind.
Okay, so if the mind is the central processing unit for all experience, then we need to understand the rules it operates by.
And there's one absolute, universal rule that governs the mind's operation, the vibrational principle. This isn't just a poetic concept, it's a law of psychic physics.
Tell us more about this vibrational scope, because it sounds like this is where the whole zero-sum argument is built.
It is. All existence in the universe, including our internal states of happiness and unhappiness, is fundamentally vibrational. The mind processes pleasure and pain within its specific vibrational scope, kind of like a radio receiver tuning into different frequencies.
Okay.
And here's the crucial part. In any vibrational field in this finite universe, stability and equilibrium must be maintained. And how is equilibrium maintained? Only by the dynamic balance of two opposites, the positive and the negative.
So happiness and unhappiness aren't two separate things we can just collect independently, like stamps. They're proportional oscillations on a single scale.
Precisely. And this leads to the critical insight. Unhappiness and happiness increase proportionately. If you increase the amplitude of the positive oscillation, the pleasure, the material enjoyment in the physical realm,
Yes.
the universal accounting system dictates that you must, simultaneously and proportionally, increase the corresponding amplitude of the negative oscillation, the pain, the risk, the strain, to maintain systemic equilibrium.
Now, that is a radical claim. I mean, we believe technology lets us break this rule. We believe the motor car is just purely better than the bullet cart. How does the source material argue against that?
It argues using the dual aids of consequence. While the motor car brings immense bodily comfort and speed, that's the positive side, the shift also involves far greater risks of accidents.
Right, accidents that are more catastrophic, more common.
And more widespread than the slow, localized risks you'd get with a bullet cart.
And the airplane.
Same principle. It increases travel comfort dramatically, but the potential for a catastrophic, large-scale tragedy increases in almost equal proportion to the convenience you gained.
Wow. It's like we're seeking this high-fidelity enjoyment, and the universe says, sure, you can have it, but the high-fidelity suffering has to come along with it to keep the books balanced.
That's a great way to put it. We're running a massive cosmic account, and we only ever look at the credit column.
And that failure to account for the debit side, you're saying it's rooted in a misunderstanding of how we experience things, this physico-psychic nature.
Exactly.
Explain that distinction again. Why isn't physical pleasure in the body?
The sources are really meticulous here. Physical pleasure is not an end in itself. It's a mental translation of a physical state. When we feel comfort, what that actually means is there's a relaxation of nerves, which then generates a specific, favorable mental vibration.
And pain.
If we're in pain, the nerves are strained, which generates an unfavorable vibration. The body is the physical source, but the mind is the locus of the experience.
This means we need to look at the two essential feelings, or vedana, that categorize this physical exchange.
Yes. In this physical stratum, which is called kama, we identify two.
What are they?
First, there's anukula vedana.
Okay, that's the favorable feeling.
That's the positive mark, the comfort, the nerve relaxation. It's what we actively chase.
And the second one must be the opposite.
It is. Pratikula vedana, the unfavorable feeling. This is the tension, the strain, the discomfort, or the pain, the immediate or the deferred negative mark on the ledger.
And when we declare progress, we're engaging in that false accounting you mentioned earlier. We're only acknowledging the anukula vedana.
Exactly right. What we call progress is merely the awareness of the favorable feeling. We either mentally filter out the corresponding pratikula vedana, the systemic strain, the environmental cost, the accident risk, or we consciously ignore it because we're so focused on the pleasure.
It's like the moment you buy a new, faster device. You feel the pleasure of its convenience, anukula vedana, but you completely fail to register the chronic tension that comes with being constantly available, tethered to work, exposed to this relentless information flow. That's the slow burn pratikula vedana.
The analogy in the source material just encapsulates this perfectly. Imagine a government that raises employee salaries significantly.
Okay, a huge positive mark in the ledger. Everyone's happy.
But instantly, they recover the entirety of that increased expenditure through higher taxation and new fees.
So the moment the credit hits your bank account, the debit is applied.
The nominal salary went up? Yes, but the real purchasing power, the actual net gain, remained zero. Was that economic progress for the employee?
No, not at all.
In the same way, in the physical stratum, in comma, the balance is nil. The comfort you gained is neutralized by the corresponding risk and strain required to maintain the vibrational equilibrium of the universe.
So the powerful, and frankly a bit of a revolutionary conclusion here, is that material advancement in and of itself is a zero-sum game built on a false promise.
It is?
We exert this enormous energy-chasing physical pleasure only to find that the proportionate pain just cancels it all out.
It's the trap of the finite world. The moment you define a finite goal, like more comfort or faster speed, that vibrational principle locks in the opposition, which forces us to move beyond the body and into the next sphere, the intellectual realm.
Okay, so if the physical sphere, is governed by this balance of nerve relaxation and strain, the intellectual sphere, artha, must be, well, a much more subtle, extensive, and potentially volatile domain.
It is indeed far more extensive. The primary distinction is that feelings here aren't caused by physical nerve activity, but by the increase in chashuda, which means mental appetite.
Mental appetite. So we're talking about the demand for mental pabulum, or food for the mind.
Precisely. The human mind, as it evolves, requires more complex, more nuanced, and more stimulating information just to feel satisfied. It seeks out philosophy, art, complex data, abstract challenges.
That's the expansion of the psychic sphere.
It is. However, the sources remind us that while our mental appetite increases, the actual dimensions of the mind, its core capacity, they don't expand infinitely.
And critically, the vibrational principle still reigns supreme.
It absolutely does.
So even though intellectual activity seems purely abstract, the growth in knowledge is still governed by that same balance of opposites.
It is unavoidable. The mental state that provides more intellectual food, the expansion, the insight, the high of learning, the anukula vedanyam, that results in a corresponding increase in intellectual discomfort, anxiety, or internal conflict.
The pratikula vedanya.
Right. It all has to happen to maintain that critical equilibrium.
Wait a minute. This challenges one of our most sacred modern beliefs, that knowledge is purely good. Are you saying that intellectual advancement inherently creates more suffering?
The framework suggests it does, because of the nature of the finite psychic sphere. Consider the contrast. In ancient times, people who were, intellectually backward, those whose minds required less pabulum, they also had fewer deep emotional disturbances.
Their potential for profound happiness was low.
But their potential for profound sustained suffering was also low.
But the highly intellectual person today.
They are extra sensitive. Their refined minds are capable of perceiving complex threats, abstract existential dilemmas, intricate interpersonal problems that a simpler mind would never even register.
So they suffer sleepless nights worrying about geopolitical crises or philosophical paradoxes that they themselves conceived of.
They create unnecessary problems out of nothing. The sophisticated mind is an engine of both immense joy and immense anxiety.
So while a modern person might enjoy 1,000 times more intellectual pleasure than someone... Now, beyond this dynamic balance, the sources introduce two more complex states of feeling that we might mistake for some kind of intellectual or psychic peace.
Yes.
These are the non-progressive mental states, nirupiksavedanyam and avedanyam. We have to address these because they sound like common coping mechanisms.
They are. Let's start with nirupiksavedanyam. This is defined as the relative absence of pain or pleasure. On the surface, it looks like a state of calm.
Right, the person who seems unflappable.
But how is it achieved? It's achieved through psychic suppression or repression, what the sources call daman, or intense mental pressure.
So this is the stoic who refuses to engage with their feelings, the person who builds an impenetrable wall around their emotional life.
It's an unnatural state. It isn't true progress because of the controlled state, a holding pattern. Whether that mental pressure lasts minutes or years or decades, the crucial point is that the reactive momentum, the energy from the pleasure-pain cycle, is not neutralized. It's not transmuted. It is merely accumulated.
So when that psychic control is eventually removed, when the wall finally breaks down, what happens?
The accumulated repressed energy just bursts forth, and it results in an inevitable, intense oscillation of either acute pleasure or acute pain. It's just deferred baggage. It's not eliminated debt.
So psychic suppression, while maybe it's useful in the short term, doesn't lead to any real structural progress. It just delays the reaction.
It only delays the vibrational reaction.
Okay, then we have avedanium. This one sounds like a philosophical extreme.
It is. Avedanium is an unnatural state where the function of nerve cells is either forcibly stopped or the individual adopts a radical philosophical attitude that denies the existence of the mundane or crude physicality.
This often manifests as a kind of intellectual nihilism, right? Where the person reasons that whatever exists is illusory and therefore it's irrelevant.
The sort of intellectual self-deception that aims to dissolve the self entirely just to avoid suffering.
And then sources categorize this as what?
As delusion. It promotes nihilism and is comparable to a form of death because it stops or denies crucial psychophysical functions. And since the ultimate goal of life is paramashuva, supreme realization and existence, a state of denial and non-functionality can't possibly be a path to progress.
And just like suppression, it must eventually break under pressure.
Invariably, internal or external shocks, a profound, undeniable blow to the mind or body will shatter this illusion, forcing the person back into a state of acute feeling, be it pain or pleasure. It cannot be sustained.
So the conclusion across all four of these possible psychic states is that the pursuit of intellectual pleasure, artha, if it doesn't have a higher goal, is locked in this zero-sum conflict. Every sophisticated insight comes with a sophisticated form of anxiety.
And we can actually see the consequences of this intellectual clash manifesting visibly in society.
The sources point to a specific consequence here: the clash of emotions.
Yes. The sheer volume and complexity of intellectual growth translates into a greater clash of emotions than we've ever seen before. The mind is constantly stimulated, constantly analyzing, constantly fearing, constantly desiring.
And the tragic practical result of this is a clear increase in mental disease.
The sources predict a noticeable growth of mad people in society. The nervous system and the mind are just fundamentally unequipped to handle this perpetual high-stakes emotional clash that's generated by unchecked intellectual advancement.
So the rise of intellectual complexity without a commensurate rise in spiritual defense actually confirms that intellectual progress is not true progress.
It creates instability, not forward movement toward the supreme good.
It's a sobering assessment. So we've basically eliminated the physical sphere, kama, and the intellectual sphere, artha, as sources of true progress because they're both governed by this zero-sum principle of vibrational equilibrium.
That's right.
Which leaves us with the third sphere, the spiritual, which must be the path to paramashupa.
This section is the great pivot. It's the moment we identify the escape route from the finite treadmill. The spiritual field is the triumph because it operates under a fundamentally different governing principle.
And that distinction is the very nature of the goal itself.
Precisely. The goal of the spiritual field is not finite. It is infinite.
And if the goal is infinite,
there can be no finite measuring stick or boundary to define an opposing state.
That is the philosophical escape clause. The reason the physical and intellectual worlds are zero-sum is because they're finite. The pendulum has to swing between a finite positive and a finite negative limit.
Exactly.
But if the goal is infinite, those opposing states, anukula, particula, avedana, nirapeksa, they simply cannot exist in that sphere.
The opposition is nullified. Therefore, only one form of feeling is expressed in the spiritual realm. Aplutavedanyam.
Aplutavedanyam. And that is?
A state of overflowing, non-reactive, all-encompassing realization.
Okay, let's delve into this unique state. Aplutavedanyam. If it's non-reactive, how does it function? And how do we measure the progress we make in this sphere? The sources describe its expression as either non-lateral or multilateral.
Yeah, so the first one, the non-lateral expression, is key to understanding pure movement. This is a non-subjective vibration, and it functions through a deeply focused psychic existence. It's called Bahuprajnana Vedana or Bahasotara Vedana.
And the mechanism here that breaks the zero-sum rule.
The crucial feature is that to maintain equilibrium in this phase, negative speed is simply not required. Since the movement is toward the infinite, there is no corresponding proportionate negative force pulling in the opposite direction.
This is truly revolutionary. There is no debit column in this accounting system.
None. The movement is purely from negativity, that is, the limited self-depositivity, the infinite goal. There's no question of minuses, there are only pluses. Every single movement, every effort, every subtle realization is net positive progress.
This is the real non-retarding form of progress.
It is.
That is profound. Now, the second form, the multilateral expression, That seems to be a bridge between the finite and the infinite.
It is. It's the samizmortavedana. It's described as a cosmological vibration, a psychospiritual connection. This feeling occurs within the psychic sphere, but it's directly linked to or touching the spiritual sphere.
So this sounds like the level we can actively work on in our daily lives, the ethical and realization-based progress.
Precisely. This intermediate level of progress is termed dharma. And because it still has a foot in the mental world, progress at this level is both real and it can be measured to some extent.
How so?
We can observe tangible shifts in compassion, self-control, and intellectual clarity that prove positive movement has occurred.
And then the apex, the goal itself.
That is pure spiritual progress, which is known as moksha. This is the attainment of supreme blessedness, the absorption into the infinite. This level is entirely unmeasurable.
Why?
Because no finite human scale can quantify the infinite state of realization.
This framework gives us a complete strategic hierarchy for human aspiration, moving beyond those limiting loops of material and intellectual pursuit. Let's formally recap these 4 goals of human life. Collectively, they're called the Chaturvarga.
Yes, the Chaturvarga provides the complete map. First, kama, the so-called physical progress, which is zero-sum, neutralized by proportional pain and risk.
Right.
Second, so-called intellectual progress, also zero-sum, neutralized by proportional emotional conflict and mental strain.
Then we get to the real progress.
Dharma, psycho-spiritual progress. This is real, it's measurable, and it's net positive progress achieved through spiritual alignment.
And finally, the ultimate goal.
Moksha, pure spiritual progress. Real, unmeasurable, infinite realization.
The conclusion here seems undeniable, but it does require a strategic choice. Since only Dharma and Moksha offer true, net positive movement, the wise person has to shift their focus.
That is the definitive directive from the sources. Humans should aim at Dharma and Moksha, not Kama and Artha, because only the spiritual path is guaranteed to be non-retarding, escaping the necessary reactionary momentum that's inherent in the finite world.
Okay, this is the critical, actionable section for anyone listening. We've established that physical and intellectual pursuits are these zero-sum games. But we can't just stop science or technology or learning. We need them to survive and function. So should we just retreat from the world?
Absolutely not. And the sources affirm the necessity of the base. We must continue our efforts in science and intellect, the Kama and Artha spheres, because they form the necessary platform for spiritual striving.
Right. You can't have spiritual progress without a functioning, healthy, and intelligent body and mind.
It's about balance, not abandonment.
So the strategy isn't about avoiding effort. It's about managing the reaction. We have to continue to build the base, but protect ourselves from the inherent zero-sum momentum that comes with that base.
The imperative is caution. Caution about the effects, the reactive momenta of physical and intellectual efforts on the human body and mind. And this is where the sources provide a really intense cautionary warning about the future of the human form if we fail to heed this.
This ties directly into the overwhelming speed and complexity of modern life. What is the physical cost of unchecked progress?
The quick, frantic momentum of modern physical progress puts incredible strain on the entire nervous system. The continuous sensory stimulation, the constant input, the increased mental processing required to navigate a fast-paced environment. It all forces the brain, the cranium, to work harder than ever before.
And the heart, the center of our physical resilience.
That increased cranial and nervous activity naturally results in the weakening of the heart. The very thing we call civilization is applying a systemic stress that leads to a foundational health breakdown. That's why the fatal diseases most associated with modernity are connected with the heart and the nerves.
And this isn't just about general stress. This is about biological, structural adaptation over time. Tell us about the predicted change in human stature if we fail to transmute this strain.
Well, if this continues unchecked, the physical structure of human beings will change radically and quickly.
How so?
Due to the chronic strain on the nerves, they will stiffen. The cranium will become disproportionately larger to accommodate the demands of processing this continuous information.
And the rest of the body.
Conversely, the demands placed on the skeletal structure will decrease and the bones will become thinner.
So you get this truly unsettling vision. Lean, thin limbs, stiff nerves, a weakened heart, and a disproportionately large head.
A body designed for mental consumption and frantic processing, but one that is biologically fragile. This just emphasizes that uncontrolled Kama and Artha are not just zero-sum, they are actively destructive.
And the same destructive process applies mentally, right? The uncontrolled intellectual sphere leads to that intense emotional clash.
Which we established causes a noticeable increase in mental disorders and insanity. The fundamental definition holds. True progress must have no retardation. If we are facing guaranteed structural and mental degradation, that movement is adogati.
Okay, so if the base is necessary, but the reaction is inevitable, what is the strategy for the spiritual aspirant? How do we use the physical and intellectual bases without suffering their inevitable, painful reaction? This brings us to the method of transmutation.
This is the essential tool. This is the key to transforming that zero-sum effort into net positive progress. We must learn to transmute or consume cruder reactive waves into subtler, non-reactive ones. It is the only escape route from the extreme effects of the physical and intellectual reactive momenta.
Let's make this practical for the listener. How do we start transmuting physical waves? You know, the vibrations of comfort and pain, of sensory overload.
We must convert the physical realm's jagetic pleasure and pain vibrations into physico-psychic vibrations.
What does that mean in practice?
It means taking the energy associated with the physical experience and refining it, shifting the focus from the crude sensation to the subtle mental processing of that sensation.
And what's the tangible result of doing that?
The feeling of pain or pleasure becomes less acute, less intense, less sticky. The physical sphere itself doesn't shrink, but the mind's susceptibility to its reactions is shielded. By reducing the intensity of the physical pleasure we crave, we automatically reduce the severity of the corresponding pain that equilibrium demands.
It's a kind of preemptive defense. By reducing our attachment to the positive extreme physical pleasure, we automatically reduce our vulnerability to the negative extreme, which is physical pain. We leverage the base, but we neutralize its zero-sum tendency.
It saves the mind from the full force of the reaction. Now, the same method must be applied to the more volatile conflicts of the intellectual sphere.
So how do we transmute intellectual waves, the constant anxiety, the abstract fears, the clash of complex emotions?
We convert those intellectual waves into intellectual spiritual ones. This is the integration of wisdom and spiritual perspective into our reasoning and our emotional life. It's elevating the intellectual process beyond mere analysis and problem creation.
So instead of using my intellect to spin these endless cycles of worry, I use that same intellectual energy to seek deeper meaning or connection or service.
That is the essence of it. This process protects the mind from psychic reactive momenta. It ensures the mind is not overwhelmed by either the rush of extreme intellectual pleasure like vanity or superiority, or the crash of extreme psychic pain like anxiety and depression.
This specific mental state of stability is referenced in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? It's a highly valued state of equipoise.
It is the practical manifestation of transmutation. The state is described as dukesu anuvinyamana, sukesu vigataspra.
Which mean?
The mind is unperturbed by distress and is free from craving for pleasure. When the desire for intellectual pleasure is actively lessened, the subsequent proportional reaction of intellectual pain naturally loses its destructive power.
That is the ultimate progressive strategy then. It's engagement with the world, but with an internal mechanism transmutation that chemically converts the crude reactionary energy of kama and artha into subtle, non-reactive energy that drives us toward dharma and moksha.
That's the synthesis. The wise must concern themselves primarily with the spiritual sphere, using the physical and intellectual bases only as stable platforms to support this upward movement. The material and intellectual worlds are the scaffolding, not the skyscraper itself.
The imperative is clear. This process of converting cruder waves into subtler ones is absolutely essential. It's not optional.
Because the failure to transmute is guaranteed to lead to arogati, to retardation, and to the structural degradation we discussed. The goal of life is the subtlest goal, which is to reach supreme blessedness.
And the final, undeniable conclusion from our sources leaves no room for doubt or any alternative strategies.
Nanyapantha vidyarayanaya.
There is no other way.
There is no other way to reach the ultimate destination of Paramashubha. Only this path of spiritual striving, anchored by the strategy of transmutation, guarantees true progress.
What an incredible journey. We started by questioning the very meaning of the word progress, and we ended with this profound, three-tiered map of human existence that gives us a definitive strategy for life.
It's quite a map.
We've seen that the pursuits that consume most of modern society, physical comfort, kama, and intellectual complexity, artha, are essential bases, yes, but they are zero-sum. They generate happiness and pain, or mental expansion and mental conflict in absolutely equal measure.
And we saw the dangerous consequence of ignoring this balance. Chronic heart and nerve strain, increasing societal mental disease, and even the prediction of physical degradation, the growing cranium and stiffening nerves, as the body desperately tries to adapt to the velocity of unspiritualized progress.
The ultimate wisdom, then, lies in this method of transmutation. We cannot eliminate the stressors of modern life, but we can actively convert the crude, zero-sum energy of pleasure and pain into the subtle, net positive energy of dharma and moksha.
We can. We can transform a moment of anxiety over a deadline into a moment of spiritual focus.
Absolutely. The strain you feel, that constant need to check your devices, the abstract anxiety that keeps you up at night, that is the vibrational principle in action, applying the debit against your intellectual or physical credit.
It is.
So let's leave the listener with this final provocative thought. Since the pursuit of the finite is inherently self-canceling, true efficiency is found only in the infinite. How are you actively transmuting the stress and speed of modern life right now?
It's the key question.
Are you investing your finite energy in a system that inevitably cancels itself out? Or are you strategically using that energy as fuel, converting crude waves into subtle ones and moving toward the infinite, measurable, and unmeasurable gain of the spiritual path?
That strategic choice, the choice to transmute, determines whether your daily movement is genuine pragati or unavoidable adagati.
Thank you for joining us on this profound deep dive. We hope this knowledge serves as your guide to true, lasting progress.